By unanimous vote, the Sioux City Community School District School Board has accepted the resignation of its superintendent, Dr. Juan Córdova. Córdova, only on the job 6 months, has been on paid administrative leave since November. KTIV's Katie Koppel is with Live Link 4 inside school district headquarters tonight. She was there as the vote came down and as the president of the school board read a statement following their action. Katie, what's the latest?
Matt, that closed session began at 5:30, lasted less than 30 minutes. Just about 6 o'clock, the board members came back, and in open session, there was one action item where they accepted the resignation of Dr. Juan Córdova as superintendent. Now, that resignation will end on, or his employment with the district will end on March 31st. Now, the closed session tonight was to, quote, evaluate the professional competency of an individual whose appointment, hiring, performance, or discharge is being considered when necessary to prevent needless or irreparable injury to that individual's reputation. Following that closed session, the one action item on the agenda for open session was to accept his resignation, which was approved unanimously by the board. After the vote to approve his resignation, Board President Jan George read a short statement saying it was a mutual decision, citing licensing issues and administrative differences, and that there would be no further comment at this time. Now, Dr. Córdova, who came from a school district in Missouri where he was an associate superintendent of instruction, was hired on a 3-year contract beginning this school year at $275,000. Now, his hiring did come after a long search, and he was one of 2 finalists for this position. He was not in attendance tonight. Now, the board praised Associate Superintendent Angela Bemis for her work in leading the district since Córdova's leave in November. The district will now discuss who will be the interim superintendent until they hire a more permanent replacement. But Matt, that is what we have for you tonight. Definitely a short meeting, but with only one item on the agenda. They will begin a new search for a superintendent tonight.
KTIV's Katie Koppel for us tonight in downtown Sioux City. Katie, thank you.